This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Today on the show, I have Tom O'Connell of O'Connell Sports Management. Since 1997, Tom has represented over 70 professional baseball players and is a certified agent with the Major League Baseball Players Association and the state of Florida. This is a great story. This is a fantastic entrepreneurial story about someone starting from scratch, grinding it out, and having massive passion. It just so happens that one of Tom's first clients, might have been the first, is a good friend of mine named Kevin Gallagher. Kevin appeared in my film, and at one point in time, threw the baseball very, very fast, close to 100 miles an hour, if I'm not mistaken. Kevin can correct me. But anyways, 6 degrees of separation. I met Tom several years ago, and I found out more about his business, and his business has just taken off, his sports management business. And I thought it'd be a fantastic story to kind of get in. How does one start in the world of sports agents? How does one start? Tom tells us. What a great story. A lot of fun. So I got to get you in that frame of mind where you think back in the day before all the fame and adulation and the screaming girls that attack you at all the screaming girls that attack you at all the stadiums. Second only.
I understand. Well, I wish that happened, buddy. But I'm I can get back to that relatively quickly because I live, sweat, and breathe those years, and they're still burned into my brain. So
okay, let me just take you back to. Well, I tell you what. Tell me what is the most important thing that you're working on right now that you can talk about to a global audience?
Well, just getting ready for the off season. I mean, obviously the season ended yesterday. I've got 5 salary arbitration cases, which is basically the pinnacle of a young player that I will start to prepare for, which I've been preparing for a couple of months, but it's very in-depth, and it's stuff that I'm going to have to do. It's going to culminate at the end of January, early February. And I also have a couple of free agents, obviously, that I have to start preparing to get their file their free agency and then start taking calls from different organizations to see which is the best fit. So this time of year is now becomes a very critical and very important part of my projections for 2014.
Okay. So I just sat here the other night and watched all the way through for the first time this Moneyball flick, which I think is a pretty good movie. It's a pretty good movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
And I think we talked about this before, but how much, as you prepare for the salary arbitration cases, as you prepare to represent players to various organizations, your statistical work, I'm assuming, has expanded, and amongst all people in your position has expanded multifold in the last 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years, correct?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that how a salary arbitration environment works is basically if you can't settle your case with the club prior to the hearing, then you go into a hearing with your player, and you're going to present your case in front of 3 independent arbiters that are agreed upon from the Major League Baseball Players Association and the Major League Baseball Commissioner's Office. The club gets an hour to present their case regarding the player. You get an hour to present your case regarding the player. And each team has a half an hour to rebuttal anything that was presented during the hearing. So, again, it's a very dynamic process, but the one critical thing is you don't want to get too complicated. In other words, there's a lot of, because of the Bill James and sabermetrics, there is a tremendous amount of information that's out there now. that everybody's using. And for me, and my attorney is a gentleman by the name of Jeff Fennell, who worked at the Major League Baseball Players Association for 10 years. He went to private practice in 2010. Company's Fennell and Associates. And Jeff's main focus is to handle salary arbitration cases for agents like myself. And he's one of the best out there. He had a tremendous result with Anibal Sanchez when he beat the Marlins a couple of years ago. Basically, Jeff and I will now basically recap the year, what we feel our player did, prepare our case accordingly. And then when we're if we have to go to hearing and present the information, we want to keep it simple as possible where it's understandable, where we're not going to lose the arbiter. So even though there are some great, interesting sabermetric statistics out there, ultimately it comes down to ERA, wins and losses, batting averages, home runs, RBIs. I mean, the traditional statistics. Now, granted, we may throw in WAR and we may throw in, others, sabermetric statistics like that, but ultimately, we got to try to keep this relatively straightforward so that way we can present our case where it's very easy to understand and we can hammer home our points during the hearing.
It's not just necessarily, I think I'm going to answer this as I ask you the question, but it's not necessarily just recapping the prior year. It's also projecting, correct?
Yeah, well, look, when you're going through this process, basically, if it's a first-time eligible guy, then you got to recap his whole entire first 3 years at the major leagues, because it's not until they get 3 years of major league service that they're eligible for salary arbitration. So now the first time they go, for example, like Mike Dunn for the Marlins this year is one of my clients. Mike will be going for the very first time against the Marlins, so we have to recap his first 3 years in the major leagues. We got to break down all the years leading up to his what they call a platform year, which was his 2013 season. And basically in salary arbitration, it's really about what have you done for me lately. So a player could even have a subpar 2011 and 12, but he had a breakout 2013, then his salary is going to reflect that. So Mike had a great year, finished the season strong for the Marlins. He's got a very nice case, and going into this offseason, we're going to prepare to tell the story of Mike Dunn from takeoff to touchdown to where he is now at the major league level, with the emphasis on the fact that he had a great platform year, and that's going to benefit him in salary arbitration. Now, Luke Gregerson, who's another one of my clients who obviously you're familiar with, that you met, a San Diego Padre. Luke has been one of the most premier setup men in baseball over the last 4 years, and he's going to arbitration for his final time. And when you get a player who's already been through the process a couple times, you've already told that original story about his first 3 years. In other words, you really carried that water. So now it's going to be really more focused on who are guys that are similar to Luke that have had the same type of success at the major league level year in and year out. And those are the comparable guys that we're going to try to basically, because in other words, you have to find guys that have already kind of laid this groundwork, that have carried this water, so to speak. So those are the guys that you're going to have the most comparable argument to, and that's what we have to drive home in a hearing.
So I got kind of a random question before we get back on track. So the young guy that you represented, I assume still, the young catcher, are you still representing him?
The refreshment, which one?
The guy met in San Diego a couple of years ago, the high school kid that went to Seattle.
Oh, yeah. Yes. The kid from the Affleck game, Tyler Morlett. Yeah. Tyler actually was a 5th-round pick a couple years ago, and he's had a breakout season this year, hit over 300, was an all-star, and he has been a very, very solid minor league player to this point. With, his track looks very good. He's got a really, really realistic chance of being a major league player here in the next year or two.
It's funny. I think back as I sat there and I watched that game with you, and I'm sure when you went to represent him in the draft, him hitting a home run in the All-Star game did not hurt his cause. But it was really interesting, and you were kind of explaining to watch a high school All-Star game, which is not necessarily doesn't mean those guys are all going to make it. You can look back and see all the guys that don't make it, but there was something from an athletic prowess, and you see it every year, obviously, at these games, but there was an athletic prowess on the field for 17, 18, 19-year-old guys that's just really extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, you can kind of tell. I mean, one thing about Tyler Morlett, is he had that it factor. I mean, he was just a very confident kid. He was well above the tool of power for his position. I mean, you don't see a lot of catchers with that tool, and he's a very strong hitter with a lot of power. I knew that was going to translate into him being a successful minor league player. I mean, I think he would have been an outstanding college player. I think he could have been an All-American, probably a Team USA guy, because he just had a tremendous approach at the plate. But at the same time, he felt that he wanted to get his professional career going, and he was drafted in the 5th round with Seattle and signed for, if I remember right, I think it was $650,000-$700,000. So.
It's not bad at 18, is it?
No, that's you can keep the electric on with that, so which is good. So.
Okay, before we get back into some of your more current details, I'm going to make you talk about the boring stuff, because I do have a lot of people listening. They could be traders, other entrepreneurs, but people like to hear how other people make it through their career, get started, and I think you've got a fairly unique story. I mean, we met through a childhood friend of mine, and why don't you start from the beginning, how you ended up becoming a Major League Baseball agent? Where were you? What were you doing?
I was. Well, first of all, I'd like to say hello, because I guess we just got right on the call. Hello to Mike Covel's listening audience. I appreciate you guys taking the time this Monday morning to have me on. And
don't worry, I'll introduce you before we start. Don't worry.
What's that?
You'll get introduced. This is not happening right now.
Oh, this isn't happening right now.
No, you will be introduced. Don't worry when it's all said and done.
Oh, okay. But I mean, obviously, this is the interview, right? We're doing the interview now,
of course.
Yeah, okay.
I try to keep everybody on their toes. You just don't know what's happening.
Okay. Well,
I'm 8,000 miles. I'm 8,000 miles away, man. Come on. I'm in Vietnam. You're in Tampa, right? You're in Tampa. Come on.
It's probably not as exciting here in Tampa as it is in Vietnam. But hey, to each his own. I'm very, very. Every day I think about it, Mike. I just love the fact that you're in Vietnam.
Okay. Back to
it's 1997.
Yeah.
1997. I'm in the nightclub business. I was running nightclubs, and a big attorney.
How old were you in 1997?
I was 30, I want to say 31, if I recall right, 31, 32 years old. So I just become the general manager of this nightclub, and I've been there since 93, and it was 97. So I was still, I was a pretty young guy. John Morgan is a big attorney here in Florida, probably one of the biggest personal injury attorneys in the country. John owned a portion of the club, and he was getting ready to start a sports division off of his law firm. And, John and I had become friends, and he basically said to me, look, I'm starting Bonacani and Morgan Sports. We're going to have a baseball division. I want you to come work for me, and I want you to build a minor league baseball division. And honestly, at the time, I had never really thought about becoming a sports agent. I, just had kind of worked my way up to the status of where I was going to start making some solid money in the nightclub business. And basically, he just said, "Look, I'll pay you a very small salary, and I'll give you, you can bartend 3 nights a week to pay your bills. But if you're interested, I'd love for you to come on board and help us build this thing, in 97. So, obviously it was.
I got to stop you for a second. You got to brag. You got to brag about yourself for a second, because I think a lot of people are thinking, hold on, guys work in nightclub business. He's might be doing some bartending. Big attorney in Florida, even though you guys are friends, says, hey, I want you to come start. You played baseball. Give me some. That seemed like a jump there. What happened?
Well, I mean, look, I was a college baseball player. I played at Suffolk Community College in Long Island. And then I played at Florida Southern for 1 year on the JV, so it wasn't even really I was a roster guy for them. But, I had, like our mutual friend, Kevin Gallagher, was a buddy of mine. And I because I was in the hotbed of baseball in Orlando for spring training, I knew a lot of guys. A lot of guys came in, and Chad Mottola was another good friend of mine who was playing with the I forget at the time.
Houston?
It was Cincinnati. He's still with Cincinnati, I believe.
Okay.
He's the major league hitting coach now for the Toronto Blue Jays, but I believe he was still with the Reds at the time. Dan Maselli was a buddy of mine, and he was, I think, at the time with either the San Diego Padres. He pitched on the World Series team in 1998, and Dan lived in Orlando, and he was a buddy of mine. So
you had a feel for it.
Oh, I knew baseball. You know what I mean? And the name of the company was Bonacani and Morgan Sports, and it was Nick Bonacani's senior son, Nick Jr., not Mark. Mark was the paraplegic, but Nick. And Nick was a PI attorney for John Morgan, and worked in his firm in Orlando. And then Mike Carter was another they both licensed football agents. And Mike was a former UCF standout player, played for the Denver Broncos. And Mike and Nick were going to run football. But basically, John really just wanted me he basically said, look, he pulled me in his office and said, hey, I'm going to give you 6 months. If you do a good job, I'll give you another 6 months. I want 10 players, minor league players, because we didn't want to mess with the major leagues because you had no idea what we were doing. And in the draft, we didn't want to mess with them because we didn't want to obviously hurt a person's future because we didn't have any relationships and really didn't have a grasp for the industry yet. So I proceeded to had really no clue on how I was going to do this, but I called my friend Kevin Gallagher and I said, Gally, I go, what does your agent do for you? He goes, well, he does my taxes and he gets me my gloves and my shoes and he takes me to dinner a couple times a year. And I was like, well, hell, I could do that. I go, thanks, Gally, and hung up. And turns out Gally was one of my first clients. But so then I just kind of asked around. I had a few friends and kind of just got a feel for what the job was going to entail. So I called Morgan the next week and I said, hey, I'm going to take the job. Put in my notice took the owners of the club very much by surprise because they had just, a month and a half or 2 months before that given me the job as the GM and they couldn't believe what I was doing. And I said, look, guys, I just don't want to be in the nightclub business the rest of my life. No offense to you guys, but I just, I have a different plan in store, and I'm not saying this is going to be what it is, but it's something that, I want to take a shot at.
Okay, I got to stop you there. I got to start there. So a lot of people might be in this situation. You've put some time in. You're in your early 30s. You're not 18 anymore. You're not 22, and you're taking a risk. So,
a major risk.
Okay,
major risk.
What's going through your head? Would you just?
Well, you know what it was, Mike. Look, I just felt that as much as I enjoyed, running the club, I didn't want to do it forever. You know what I mean? And I was at the stage of my life where I was talking to my dad. My dad passed away in 2006, but he said to me, at the time, he goes, look, you got to take chance. Sometimes you got to take a chance, and you can make a mistake at 31. You can't make the same mistake at 45. So, I was 31. I was married with no kids, and it was one of those situations where I just said to myself, if I'm going to take the shot, now's the time to do it. Because if this doesn't work out, I knew I could always go back to running nightclubs. I could do that with my eyes closed. You know what I mean? So, but this was a totally new and different challenge for me. And it was something that, I'll never forget the first day I'm sitting in, I go into the office, because John Morgan had this beautiful law office on the 16th floor in Orlando, downtown Orlando. And I'm sitting in my, I basically, park the car and I go to the cafe and I grab a paper and a cup of coffee and I walk up to my cubicle. I was working in they gave me this little cubicle, a secretary's cubicle, and, basically kind of was sitting in front of this computer and I really, was saying to myself, what am I going to do here? So I started reading the paper. You got to understand now, this is a very prestigious law firm and all the partners. And so I had my feet up and I'm reading the paper.
First day?
The first day. Because, seriously, I'm coming from a nightclub background, so I didn't understand the culture of a law office because I never went to law school and I didn't understand how lawyers think and how they act. And, I'd been around a few lawyers, but none of them were my friends. And I didn't understand how the road to becoming an attorney is a very tough one. And you got to pass the Florida bar and all that stuff. But I didn't take any of that into account. I basically was the new guy sitting there reading the sports section, trying to figure out how the hell I'm going to get started as a sports agent. One of the senior partners, Scott Bates, walked by and said, he said very quickly to me, he goes, "Who the hell are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Tom O'Connell. Who are you?" And he goes, "I'm Scott Bates. I'm the senior partner here at Morgan & Morgan." I said, "Well, nice to meet you, Scott." And Tom O'Connell. So Scott goes, "You stay right here." So Scott proceeded to walk down to Morgan's office and said to John, he goes, "Who the hell is that guy out there with his feet up reading the paper?" And John was like, "What are you talking about?" The guy, Tom O'Connell. So, that's the sports guy. You just leave him alone. Don't worry about him. So, you know what I mean? And that's kind of how.
But hold on, But as you downplayed some things, I just want to interject something because I haven't asked this question yet. I'm going to continue on this early part of your career. How many players do you represent in minor and Major League Baseball right now today?
I have 11 Major League players and 35 players total. So the rest are minor leaguers. We had this year we had the first overall pick with the San Francisco Giants. The number 25th overall pick, Christian Arroyo. We had the 55th overall pick, Tyler Danish, with the Chicago White Sox. And then we got Sean Brady with the Cleveland Indians in later in the draft, $800,000. We had the best draft we ever had. Jonathan Neese of the New York Mets. We did a 5-year, $25 million deal for him last year. Luke Gregerson is one of the premier setup men in baseball. Ryan Hannigan, starting catcher in Cincinnati. Mike Karp, who will be on display, him and Hannigan, in the postseason for the Boston Red Sox. And Mike Dunn, Tyler Flowers, Dale Thayer, Jeff Decker. And the names, go on and on. Obviously, we have also and Wade Miley, who was the runner-up for Rookie of the Year last year with the Arizona Diamondbacks.
So,
we have quite a few.
I wanted to just put that foundation out there as you're making fun of yourself so many years ago about reading the paper. I didn't want someone to come in mid-conversation and thinking, who is this guy O'Connell? And I just wanted to make sure people understood that we're talking about the early days.
Yes, we're talking about the 90s. We're talking about 1997. So we're talking about a long time ago.
So how long did you stay with Morgan's firm? How long did you stay with them?
Honestly, to be honest with you, I've been with John 16 years, but it was Bonaconte and Morgan for the first two. And then Nick and Mike Carter decided they realized that they couldn't be in this thing part-time and be productive sports agents in the football arena. So they decided that they were going to call it a day. So then John and I formed Legends Management Group in 2001. Actually, I worked, rewind it for a second, 2000. For a year and a half, I worked with a gentleman named Tim Shannon, who ProPay was the name of the firm, and Timmy was the son of Mike Shannon, the voice of the Cardinals. I met Tim through a buddy of mine out in Arizona. Tim was a phenomenal guy, knew everybody, and honestly, Timmy opened a tremendous amount of doors for me. I'll always be in his debt because Tim was the first real baseball agent that I worked with. Tim knew everybody. He had tremendous charisma, Pepperdine guy. I think he went to law school at Pepperdine, if I remember right. But he played at USC. He was going to be a big time NFL player, blew out his knee, played minor league baseball, and then he got his law degree at Pepperdine. And just really kind of, the one thing I really took away from my relationship with Tim was Tim knew everybody, and everybody loved him. And he was a guy that really was, when you think sports agent, you thought Tim Shannon, you know what I mean? Because he just really had a lot of charisma. And again, I think that that's a big part of his job. You have to understand the dollars and the numbers and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, this is a relationship business. And if you're not really good at that, then you're going to have a hard time being successful on your own as an agent. You can work for a big firm and kind of just blend in, but unless you have that A-list, A-type personality, it's very hard to be the guy and have your own shop in this business, in my opinion. But Timmy was with me for a year and a half, and then again, he was one of those guys that he had a lot of stuff going on, and he just didn't want to be in it hardcore in the minor leagues, because I was still building my practice. Now I don't have any major league players yet. Tim had represented Chuck Finley and a couple other guys, and I just was really focused on building my minor league brand still, and understanding when you're signing minor league players, you're not making any money because these guys are already under contract. So I'm not messing with the draft, and I'm really not. I don't have the vocabulary to be successful at the major league level at that time. So
what year? What were you talking? You're talking about early 2000s,
yeah, probably 1999, 2000. Yeah. So basically, I went to John. I think it was around 2001, if I remember right. And we said, you know what? He asked me a very tough question. He said, look, if you had to put your house up, if you had to take out a second mortgage on your house to keep this business going, would you do it? And I said, 100% I would do it. Absolutely.
Okay, I just stopped. Oh, yeah, stop there. Why'd you say that? Why'd you say 100%? What did you know? What did you know? What did you figure out? What did you see that allowed you to say that?
Because I knew I was going to be, once I figured out the whole game, Mike, I knew I was going to be good at this. I knew that I could do this. I could do this job. And I'll tell you why. Because honestly, in 1997, when John asked me to get those first 10 players, when I signed all those players, okay, 8 of them got released that following winter. Okay, because basically I was signing a bunch of stiffs and I didn't really know it. Okay, and so those 2 players that I kept, those other 8 that got released, I got them all jobs in independent baseball. So I knew I could do the job. I just had to find players that were going to play one day, hopefully at the major league level. And don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful to those 8 guys that did get, that got released. They told me that I could do the job, that I knew how to make the phone calls and get guys positioned correctly. And look, to them, they were just trying to stay on and hang on in baseball. Yeah. You know what I mean? But for me, it was about, hey, can I make the phone calls? Can I position these guys correctly? Da da da. And then I befriended a scout who lived in my area, and he really showed me the importance of understanding how to scout and recruit players. And we did that, and he taught me that the following year. I mean, I sat with him in instructional league, and he really showed me how to scout and players. And then
what was I gotta stop you. What was the biggest thing he taught you? Was there any one thing that you can think back that that first scout?
He basically said, look, this is a very simple game. Each position is graded from a scale. How baseball scouts grade guys is from a scale from 20 to 80, 20 being the lowest, 80 being the high, 80 being an impact, superstar, all-star, major league caliber player. And he basically said, look, you're not going to be able to see some of the things that I see, but it's going to be, with pitchers, you're looking at velocity, you're looking at command, you're looking at guys that are putting up, very, very successful numbers at the minor level. For position players, if you want a guy who's up the middle, anytime you look at a high school or college player, first thing you do is you look at guys up the middle. You look at shortstop, center fielder, catcher. Those are your premium positions. Those are the positions that usually pay well through the draft. But at the same time, in the minor leagues, you're looking at the same guy. I'm not looking at the guy that's pitching in a blowout game, who's got a 7 ERA. I want the guy who's got 21 saves through the month of May, and he's got a 1 ERA. He's got 20 innings with 35 punch-outs and 5 walks. That guy's a dude. A power hitting outfielder, guys hitting 320 with 25 bombs and an OPS of over 1,000. Chances are this guy's a guy. You know what I mean? And those are the types of things that he taught me. So then in 1999, it was the summer. I had a couple guys in the New York Penn League, and I was sitting there in July. It was just after the draft. And it was a day game in Auburn, in Oneonta. And actually I went to Oneonta because I had never been to the Hall of Fame before. I wanted to go there, and I still at that time loved the Yankees. And so I wanted to see the Oneonta Yankees versus the Auburn Astros and check out the Hall of Fame. So drove 20 hours from Florida. At the time, I drove everywhere. I drove up to Florida, from Florida to Oneonta. And during the day game, this kid came out named Tim Redding, who turned out to be my first major league client in 2001. And he was throwing 99. And I waited for him after the game. I said, hey, Tim, Tom O'Connell, Bonacani Morgan Sports. And I said, look, do you have an agent? He goes, no. I said, well, I loved what I saw today. I'd love to take you out to dinner and discuss being your agent. And he's like, well, we're going back to Auburn tonight right after the game. And I said, well, I'm going to follow the bus if you don't mind, if you have dinner with me. So I followed the bus 3 hours through the Catskill Mountains to Auburn, New York. And Tim and I had sat down and had dinner. He loved the Bills. I loved the Jets. We both loved the Yankees. Signed with me that night, and a couple years later, 2001, he was my first major league client with the Houston Astros. And so at the time, I guess going back to the question you had asked me about mortgaging my house, I knew that Tim Redding was going to play in the big leagues, and I wanted to see this thing through. And I also had Nick Green at the time and some other guys that I felt were going to be major league players. And I just I was just starting to figure things out. I didn't want to stop. And, the one thing that I've always been blessed with is having a tremendous partner in John Morgan, because, John funded this thing for many years when we weren't making money. And the thing of it is that, he understands that businesses like this, it's very hard to get to the backside of this business. But once you get over the hump and you get to the backside, it's tremendously lucrative. And if you have the money, the staying power to keep that dream alive, which obviously John felt it was beneficial for him to do as well, he was willing to do that. And, that's why I'll always be in his debt, that he kept the dream alive until we got to, the big contracts down, in the mid 2005, 2006, when we really started rolling.
Now, this is, anyone that reads, sports pages, you see the same big names in agents. You'll hear maybe a story about A-Rod and one of his massive contracts. You'll hear the name Scott Boras and all that kind of stuff. I mean, this is your competition. I mean, this is a competitive world. This isn't like, there's a lot of people out there that don't want you to sign anybody because they want to sign them. Yeah?
Sure. And like I said, and look, and I guess really for me, it was when I got certified with Tim, that's when I met Jeff Fennell, and Jeff was was the assistant general counsel at the Major League Baseball Players Association at the time, and Jeff and I became good friends, and he really gave me the game, you know what I mean, and he, really helped me really get a really good familiarity with the collective bargaining agreement and all the major league rules, and made me become educated beyond what I had been at the time. And I think that he was a very instrumental part of my career. He's a dear friend of mine to this day. And that's why, I've enjoyed, working with him over these last few years, because he understood where I came from and what I had to do to fight and survive. And because look, when you're coming up as a small agent, okay, all those big companies are like, yeah, Tom's a good guy, but you know what? We've done this and we've done that and this and that, and he's never really done a lot in this business and blah, blah, blah. And this is what everybody was saying to Tim Redding back in 2001 and 2. But that's why I always have a special place in my heart for Tim, because he stayed with me. And, I was with his agent his entire career, and it allowed me to start getting other players because he was at the major league level. And then once you show that you can survive in this Shark Tank, you don't get to where I am today, not to brag, you don't get to where I am today unless you really battled your ass off early on in your career. Because most guys like me either get gobbled up by the big companies or they don't make it. They fizzle out and die. And for me to be sitting here today with 11 major leaguers and 35 clients, it's something I'm very proud of, because not only have we done some great contracts over the last several years, but we have a very, very solid practice, and now it's continuing to grow exponentially. And, we feel our young players we have some tremendous young players in the system, and our major league clientele is outstanding. So again, here's something I want to get at with you. So in my world, I know a lot of guys that run hedge funds, and some of these, it's a winner take all world, kind of like, there's the Scott Boras of the world. So you got these guys that run multi-billion-dollar hedge funds. And if someone's running a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund and the other guy's running a $20 million hedge fund, well, it's the multi-billion-dollar hedge fund says to the client, why invest with him? We're huge. We got so much more scale. We got so much more this, so much more that. And so I know. Yeah, and I think that's the argument sometimes you're always going to face between the boutique agency, which kind of I'm more of the family style boutique, versus the massive 20 agent operations. And I think it really comes to it's very simple. Some guys like big, sexy lights, da da da. Some guys like, I want a tremendous relationship with my agent. I want to be able to have him answer every question. I don't want to have to go through 6 or 7 guys to get the answer that I want. But I also think it's again, even when it comes down to that, if they feel that you're the guy, I don't care if you're big or small, if you're the guy that they want to put in that ring for that fight, and they know that you're going to come out on top and you're the guy, then you know what? I don't care if you're a big agent or a small agent. You're going to be successful in this arena. And I think that's, what my guys see in me, and they understand, look, nobody has better relationships. Nobody knows more people. I know just as many people and have just as many relationships as Scott Boras or anybody else out there, because I've worked my ass off to make sure that I did.
Okay, let me tell you where I'm going with this. Let me tell you where I'm going with this. So these, I know these small hedge funds, right?
Sure.
And so let's make the analogy to a boutique agent shop like you're talking. These small hedge funds, though, they set up their funds, and they don't have what I'm hearing from you, and I'm sure the audience is hearing it, is the passion, the marketing passion, the I'm gonna do this no matter what. And so many guys I see in the fund management world, they start a fund and they don't really work it. They don't push the relationships. They don't go to the conferences. They don't go to the meetings. They don't shake the hands. They don't make the calls. They just they get a few clients, and maybe they sit back on Easy Street because it's making them, $500,000 or $1 million or whatever. but they don't have that zeal that I'm hearing in you. And I think maybe, why do you think you've got that zeal, that passion? What is it about you? I mean, because I like to think that I've got it, but why do you think you've got it?
Well, I have to attribute that to my mom and my dad. I mean, my dad was 40 years in the beer business, and I watched him get up every day at 6 a.m. and go out there and work his tail off. And my mom worked at Stony Brook University, and my mom's a very sharp lady, and they just, I learned that from my parents, my mother and my father. Look, basically nothing's given to you in life. You got to go out there and you got to work it, and you got to get it. And I think for me, Mike, I'm lucky, and it's an honor and a privilege to represent major league and minor league players. It's not everybody can do it. Not everybody wants to do it. Not everybody can do it. So I don't take for granted that these guys sign with me because of my passion. I've never lost that, and I think that's why when guys look at my clientele and they say, he really made it in this business, it's because I wasn't gonna. I've had some heartbreaks. I had some guys leave me, in 4 and 5, and I could have called it a day, and I could have put up the white flag and said, but you know what? Every time I got beat down, I dusted myself off, and I got back up, and I said, I'm going to get my break. And my break came when Manny Corpus signed an $8 million deal in 2008 after the Rockies went to the World Series, and that was my stabilizer. That's something that really kind of was able to stabilize my practice, and then I just built off it from there. I think for me, it was always about, look, I'm going to keep learning. I'm going to keep getting better. I mean, I'm 1,000 times the agent that I was even 6 years ago. You know what I mean? It's because, these experiences that you have when you go to salary arbitration or you deal with major league free agents and you're sitting in those rooms with Theo Epstein and Brian Cashman and Kevin Towers and making those deals and understanding that you've had success and you've done solid deals, you're going to continue to grow your practice, which I have. And for me, but I understand one thing about me is I'm a people guy. I've got that skill set from my dad. And I think that's what makes these guys understand that I'll go to war for them. And it's also about seeing your clients and going out and, I could sit back and just see guys when they come through Tampa, but I've spent more time on airplanes this year than I ever have in my whole life. And that's because we have had more major league players than we've had ever. So, again, I think you can't sit back and just sit behind a desk and do this job. You got to be out there in the trenches, grinding it out every day in and day out. And if you do that, you're going to probably be successful.
Okay, I got a side question here. It's still in the baseball space, but so I won't ask you about any current players unless you want to say something because they're current. But for guys that you've met, maybe retired guys, who are some of the most interesting baseball characters that you have sat down with, and why were they interesting? I mean, what was it about them? Was it a knowledge, a personality? Was there some, because I know you've been to every park, probably you've been everywhere. Like you said, it's been a whirlwind for you for over a decade. So can you think of some of the characters or some of the conversations or a dinner you might have had where someone would just kind of go, wow, that is a true major league character?
Let's see. I'm going back and trying to think of some of the guys that I've met. One of the classiest guys that I've become friends with that I really enjoy when we get together is Barry Larkin. Barry is he lives in Orlando, and he's now one of the hosts on ESPN. Just a tremendous guy, very humble, Hall of Famer. But, if you meet him and you didn't know him, he would treat you like he'd known you 10 years. And Barry is just having great success now on ESPN and, just a terrific baseball mind. Jeff Nelson from former Yankee Seattle Mariner on MLB.com. Another guy who's just, class guy. I met him playing in a couple golf tournaments. Jeff and I have stayed friends over the years, and, he's having a nice career now in broadcasting, and just a guy that was, a bulldog, pitched on those great Yankee teams when they went to the World Series. Another guy that it's just been a fun guy to be around. Tanyan Sturtz, my buddy from Boston, who is a rabid Patriots fan. I'm a huge Jets fan, and we used to always go at it. But I met Tanyan through Chad Mottola, who they played together in the minor leagues. And Tanyan and I are good buddies. He's in the insurance business down in West Palm Beach. And another great guy, and a good golfer. He likes to take my money on the golf course. But, those are some of the guys just off the top of my head that I've met. I mean, I've I've got the chance to play golf with Roger Clemens, who was a tremendous guy. And right after my dad died in 2006, I was out in Hawaii when I was seeing Mike Carp when he was playing in the Hawaiian Winter League, and his son Kobe was out there playing on the same team. And Rogers invited me out to play the Honolulu Country Club, because we'd met through Tim Redding because they played on the Astros together. And, Roger's a great guy, and he's a wonderful person, we played golf, and at the time it was very memorable for me because, it was a tough time in my life, but, he saw, hey, Tom, come on, let's go play golf. And he played 18 holes out there. So I've been very lucky, Mike, that I've got to meet a lot of great people, over the years. And, like I said, it's been a fun ride.
Let me ask you, so are the Boston fans, have they forgiven the team for last year after this year's performance? I would hope so by now.
Well, absolutely. And honestly, I'm just so happy for Mike Carp. Mike's had such a wonderful year for the Red Sox, and he's been, arguably the most productive bench player in the major leagues, and they have a very solid club going into the postseason. And Ben Cherington's done a tremendous job over there, taking them from worst to first. And I think a lot has to do with chemistry. I mean, I think they have a great clubhouse. They've got a lot of guys that they brought in, like Johnny Gomes and David Ross and Mike Napoli and obviously Carp. And they brought in the right guys. They brought in character guys that were going to come together as a unit. These guys have won a lot of big ball games. They still had, the David Ortizes and the Dustin Pedroias and the Clay Buckholts and the John Lesters, and those guys that were on those previous World Series teams were able to all get these guys united. And then, again, Boston's one of the greatest places to play baseball. I mean, those fans are so passionate. And, it's funny, when I first started in the business in 97, grew up a Yankee fan, and I love the Yankees. But, one thing that happens as you're in this business for years is you're really not a fan of anybody. You're just a fan of your guys. I really kind of fell in love with Boston when Nick Green, who was one of my first clients. It was funny, in 2008, that winter, the winter meetings were at the Bellagio Hotel in Vegas, and Alan Baird, who used to be the general manager of the Kansas City Royals, Alan's a good buddy of mine, and he's now a special assistant to, at the time it was Theo Epstein, but now he's a special assistant to Ben Cherington. But so Alan was coming out of the elevator, and he looked at me and said, "Hey, what's up? What you got?" And I said, "Well, I got a few minor league free agents I'm still on the look for." I go, "What are you looking for?" He goes, "Well, I'm looking for a shortstop in Pawtucket." I said, "Well, I got one for you, Nick Green." He goes, "Nick Green can play shortstop?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And at the time, I don't think Nick had played short in years, but, I just knew that Nick was their kind of guy. I knew what kind of manager Francona was, and that year was going to be I think it was the first World Baseball Classic, so I knew that Dustin Pedroia and Kevin Youkilis were both going to go to the WBC. So that was going to give Nick an opportunity to play a lot in spring training, and I knew that if he played a lot, Francona would fall in love with this kid, because Nick is just one of the best people I've ever been associated with. And so sure enough, Nick, we signed with Boston, and Nick went to Major League Spring Training with the Red Sox, and Pedroia and obviously Youkilis went to play with Team USA. And so Nick got to get the reps every day at second base, and that was always his best position. So I knew he was going to shine there. Had a great spring training. I think he hit like 350. And at the end of spring training, Julio Lugo got hurt, and Jed Lowry now became the starting shortstop, and the backup shortstop was Nick Green. So Nick Green made the Boston Red Sox in 2009, went on to play 83 games. But the reason I'm telling you the story is, so my mom was living with me at the time, because I said my dad passed away in 06, and so I would come home, and my mom's a diehard baseball fan. She loves baseball. So I'd come home, and she'd be sitting there, and I'd turn on the Red Sox game because Nick was playing, for the Boston Red Sox. And she was like, "Well, why are we watching the Boston Red Sox?" And I said, "Well, because your favorite, client, mine, and yours, Nick Green, is playing shortstop for the Boston Red Sox, and if he does well, your son makes money. Is that okay?" She goes, "Okay, I guess we can watch the Boston Red Sox." So halfway through the season, okay, she falls in love with Dennis Eckersley as the announcer. So and I would come home, she'd be watching the Red Sox independently. This woman grew up a diehard Yankee fan, and now she absolutely would watch. She wouldn't even watch the Yankees. She'd watch the Boston Red Sox because Nick was one of my first clients, and she loved, Nick and I were great friends, and she loved Nick. And so I turned my mother into a closet Boston Red Sox fan. But I just love Fenway Park and the atmosphere up there and the passion of that city. It's just a great place to watch baseball. But I still love obviously going to the Yankee Stadium and Citi Field as well. So
yeah, I think it's also a fun story in the sense that it kind of it maps out the chessboard, so to speak, that as an agent and how you're working for your player and how you're seeing multiple steps ahead and you're knowing the personality of a manager and knowing the personality of your player and seeing that if he gets the chance to shine, knowing that he might get a chance to crack getting on that roster. And I think it's just kind of
you have to think ahead. Yeah, it's a chess match, and you have to think, again. And that was the one thing about this year with Mike Carp. I mean, Carpy was, a guy that, last year he won the opening day job in left field. First day of the season for the Mariners, Dodger ball in the Tokyo Dome, hurts his shoulder. Okay, and now Mike had never had a starting job in the big leagues before, so Mike was a guy that now he's on the disabled list and he's fighting like hell to get back because he didn't want to lose his spot through an injury. And basically when he came back, still wasn't right, and had a kind of a down year. And then as the offseason started and we started watching the Mariners assemble their team, they went out and got Ibanez, they traded for Morales, and we could see that Mike Carp wasn't going to be in the picture here. You know what I mean? So basically I went to the general manager and I said, Jack, I go, look, it sounds to me like Mike's not going to be, in your plans for 2013. I'm going to, actively try to see what's out there for him with your permission. And looked at the Red Sox roster, and I thought that the Red Sox would be a really good fit for him. I knew he'd hit well in that ballpark. I knew that Mike was a very, very good hitter, and you put him in a lineup with David Ortiz and Mike Napoli and Johnny Gomes and the guys that they went out and got. I knew that he would probably have a great year. And, at the close of business yesterday, Mike Carp was hitting .294 with 9 home runs and 18 doubles. And, had a tremendous season for the Boston Red Sox, and he'll play a key role in their postseason run. And that's my job. My job is to find the right situations for each player and do whatever I can to help facilitate the right fit for each guy. Now, sometimes, you're not going to be able to facilitate anything, no matter how hard you try, because the club knows what they have in the player and they're not going to move them. But, if you try to work with the GM and not try to, do it public, sometimes you do a lot better when you do it very quietly behind the scenes and work out an agreement with the GM to say, look, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'd like to do it. And I'm not going to sit there and blast you in the paper and be unprofessional. I just would like to work with you to get my player in the right fit that's going to work out for well. And hopefully you guys in return will get a player of equal value and everybody's going to be happy. And, that's kind of what, our job is as agents, is to evaluate every situation for your player and try to see, what is going to be the correct result where everybody is going to, walk away like, hey, this deal worked out for everybody.
I got one last question for you. So it's kind of not really a baseball question, but I think the number one thing that if anyone's listening today is it's the passionate fighter, and not fighter in a negative sense, but just passion, fighting to win. And I don't know, I'm curious if you even, given that that's your mindset and given that you're so busy and so on the move and just working on every day, moving a step forward, if you even have a chance to even notice that perhaps that's not it's kind of something that's becoming rarer and rarer in America these days. And there's less and less people that are willing to take the chance and go fight and take the risks and just jump. And there's a lot more speaking of carp, there's a lot more carping and a lot more whining and a lot more moaning. Do you even have a chance in your busy life to even hear that anymore? Do you even pay attention that that's even going on in society to some degree? Or is it just like, you know what? I don't have time. I love what I do. I'm passionate MF and I'm moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, you can sit back and cry, oh, woe is me, but you're given, everybody every day is given certain opportunities to open certain doors and open certain windows. What you do with it, that's up to you, and, for me, look, there was, like I said earlier, there were a few times where I could have called it a day. You know what I mean? But for me, there's nothing like working for yourself. There's nothing like having your own business. And there's nothing like getting up every day and understanding, hey, look, you know what? I love what I do. This is going to be a great day. I have two, beautiful children and my wife, and, we sit there and we basically, but I understand that I'm building my company for my kids. You know what I mean? Because I want to teach them the same values and the same principles that I was taught by my mom and dad moving forward, and understanding that, look, you know what? Nothing is given to you in this life. I mean, look, everybody loves to sit there and hit the Powerball, but you know what? Guess what? That's probably not going to happen. So you better go out there and you better roll up your sleeves and get to work.
Hustle.
And you have to. I mean, you have to be a grinder, man. I mean, I think that's the one thing when if you ask people about me and say, how would you describe Tom? I think they're going to say two things. A, they're going to say straightforward, what you see is what you get. He never sits there and sugarcoats it. He gives it to you straight. And he's a grinder. And he'll get out there, he'll get on the planes, he'll drive the miles, he'll, stay, 200 nights in hotels during the year, because that's kind of what I signed up for. And I can't, there's times when you get to November, you're tired. But you know what? Baseball season isn't just 6 months a year. You got winter ball, you got spring training, you got, there's things that go on constantly in baseball. And if you're not willing to understand that this is going to be basically an 11 to 12 month a year undertaking every year in, year out, and understand when it's your company, you don't get to turn your phone off for a week and spend it in the Bahamas. Understanding that, if something goes down, you're the guy that's got to answer. Look, and I have some great people to work for me, but at the same time, how I've built my business is these guys want to deal with you. If it has to get done, it's got to go through you. If they're getting ready to make a very important decision that affects their career, they want to depend on you for the solid advice and make sure that, that you're looking at through it the same way they're looking at it, and say, look, Tom, building that trust for years of being in those wars and those battles with those guys, when they have to make major life decisions, whether it be a major contract or, uprooting their family to go pitch in a different city or play in a different city, that you've been there with them through the wars and saying that they can lean on you and say, hey, T, what do you think? Do you think that this is the right move for me and my family? I dealt with that even on a small scale last year with J.C. Boskin, a kid who was with the Braves his whole career. And he had to make a major decision because the Braves, he wasn't in their plans for 2013. I could see it, but they were trying to sell it as, oh, he's going to be our guy. I knew it wasn't going to be. And I had to convince him that it wasn't going to be. And, for him to take that leap of faith to go sign with the Chicago Cubs was a big leap of faith, because this guy knew nothing but being with the Braves for his whole career. And I just saw him last week in Chicago, and he said to me, you know what? The greatest thing you ever did for me was get me out of my comfort zone to sign here in Chicago, because it was a great year. I'm now in the big leagues, which I never would have been with Atlanta this year. And I really now feel that I can go play anywhere, because I've really been able to shed that, I can only play for the Atlanta Braves and that's it. And that's a bit, but he trusted me, and his wife trusted me to help him make that decision. And that's what this job's about. This job's about providing your clients with correct information, but ultimately gaining their trust to where when they have to make the hard life decisions, that they're going to be relying on you for those answers, and that you can come through for them time in and time out. And that's what our job is, Mike. That's what we need to do as agents, is educate our players on their value, on everything from A to Z when it comes to making decisions from going from city to city, and then hopefully, make some great choices for them where they can, have lucrative and long careers.
You said something there that's really, really key. And I think it's key for anybody in their life is the word, the phrase comfort zone. And I mean, even in my situation, I left the States here in February, and I've made about 40 presentations across Asia, to the largest mutual funds and sovereign wealth funds across Asia. So even though there's quite a bit of interesting side excursions on my trip, there's been some serious stuff too. We'll talk about the side stuff when we turn the audience off. But anyways, the point is that comfort zone thing I think is critical. It's critical for me at whatever point in career my career is at right now. It's critical for you. It's critical for people listening, is to never take for granted that it's all going to keep going, and just keep hustling every day. Hustle, hustle, hustle. And if you don't want to do that, you can sit back and, I get Social Security pays a couple grand a month, right?
Hey, buddy, lost you.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good for 8,000 miles away. We only had one click off at the very end, so we're pretty good.
Outstanding.
No, I was just saying it's the comfort zone thing, and I think and you know it about yourself already, is to never find yourself just sitting back and smelling the roses. You only get one shot at it, you get one life, and you might as well make it count, right?
100%, absolutely.
Hey man, listen, it was great having you on. I appreciate it. Such a different perspective, and I'm actually speaking to the guy who set the world land speed record in a car and is going to attempt to go over 1,000 kilometers an hour.
Not well. I mean, that's literally having your hair on fire there, man. So that's an interesting little line of work there. So I wish him obviously the best on that.
Yeah,
sure.
that's a slight bit of risk, but listen, I'm gonna cut off with you here, and we'll catch up here once this call ends for a little bit longer.
Okay. Listen, Mike, thanks for having me on, and I really, really appreciate the time.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.